Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. I really enjoy talking to y'all a whole lot about Mosins, whether it be comments, emails, which I'm a little behind on, I know, I still got to get to that, thank y'all for your patience. But a lot of the times we like to focus on the good old days. And what do I mean by the good old days? Well, there's not much that really beats sitting down with an old friend with a cup of root beer, reminiscing about the good old days when you could go down to your local sporting goods store and buy a Mosin for, I don't know, the cost of a tank of fuel. Now, unfortunately, today we've seen a rise in both of those things, but a lot of people are kind of mad now about the price of a lot of Mosins as of late, and it's understandable. Mosins are no longer $50 or $75. Average cost has gone up, depending on the model, to let's say $300 to $500. That's a pretty normal cost for a Mosin Nagant these days, at least here in the US. And that's, funny enough, got a lot of people kind of up in arms. But it's not going to get any better, because today we're going to talk about a Mosin that sold for not the cost of a price of a tank of fuel, but rather perhaps the price of the car in our driveway. Yeah. So some of y'all might need one of those air sick bags right about now. That's right, we're about to talk about a Mosin that recently sold for over $12,000. That's right. Now, a lot of y'all are going to be asking yourselves, how on earth could a Mosin Nagant be worth $12,000? And that's a great question, and that's the question that we're going to try to answer today. Now, if you want to actually go take a look at the online listing for this rifle that's sold, I'll have a link down in the description so you can take a look at it after this or follow along with me as we kind of discuss this gun. What is this Mosin that's sold, first of all? Well, this is an alleged original Finnish-captured 1937 Mosin Nagant PE, as in Papa Echo, sniper rifle. Okay, so this would be what we would consider essentially a battlefield pickup condition PE sniper rifle. Okay, now, Mosin Nagant sniper rifles, sorry, I think I've got mosquitoes out here in Colorado. Mosin Nagant sniper rifles are really nothing new, as y'all know. We feature, PU snipers here on the channel quite a lot, and a lot of y'all have probably either had experience with a PU sniper or probably seen one for sale, maybe at your local gun store, pawn shop, or gun show. They're not super rare, okay? So what makes this one special? Well, for one thing, it's a PE. When we talk about PE snipers, this is a whole different ballgame from PU snipers. The PE is a much less common model. It was made in far fewer numbers. But the important thing is something I mentioned earlier, the term battlefield pickup, okay? Now, if you find a PE sniper today for sale, it's probably a fake. It's probably a refurbished 9130 rifle that someone has then, after the fact, decided to drill and tap for a PE scope base and then put a PE scope and mount. They actually make replica PE scopes and mounts that you can just go buy off of your local flea bay. So that's not super uncommon to see, although we don't see that nearly as much as we'd say we would see fake PU snipers, or honestly even real PU snipers. But PE snipers are out there. Generally, when you see one, it's automatically a fake. Now, there are some real ones out there, but those are going to be what we call ex-sniper rifles. Okay, so that is essentially a sniper rifle that used to be a sniper rifle, but it's not a sniper rifle. Well, how does that even make any sense? Well, imagine just a typical 9130 rifle that in World War II was a sniper rifle, and then after World War II, the Soviets then decided, for many reasons, to no longer field the PE or the PEM sniper rifles, And so they just removed the scopes and mounts, filled in the drilled holes in the receivers, reissued them as regular infantry rifles. So if you see a real PE sniper today, it's probably one of those. Is that a real PE sniper? Well, I would say yes, but we can have that debate maybe another day. I'd say all this to give a little bit more context about our gun that we're talking about today and what makes this one a little bit more novel. Remember, I just said earlier that a lot of the PE, in fact, all of the PE and PEM sniper rifles that were fielded by the Soviets after World War II were essentially removed from service in that configuration, no longer sniper rifles. After World War II, the Soviets only really fielded the PU sniper rifle. So to find a sniper rifle in either the PE or PEM configurations that were never de-sniper-fied or converted into an X-sniper basically doesn't exist outside of like museums, okay? And this is where we need to be really careful when we start getting into this realm. Because really those guns, cue Indiana Jones, belong in a museum. And rightfully so, because they don't really exist. And it makes a lot of sense that they don't exist. The only way to really get a battlefield pickup PE sniper would be to have one that maybe a USGI brought back from World War II, which there may exist a few of those. But we're not talking about hundreds or probably even tens of those. You could probably count the number of those brought back by US GI service members on one hand. But, you know, I mean, they're not really out there, okay? So that's one of the reasons when we start talking about original Mosin Nagant PE snipers, we're talking about guns that are almost certainly fake, but if there's that minuscule chance they're real, we're talking lucrative amounts of money. And that's why we see this rifle here today sell for over $12,000, okay? And it's going to be a lot more than that because, of course, Gunbroker, which is where this rifle sold, charges sales tax, amongst other things. So you could do the math on that one. That's not going to be cheap when you got to pay the government for that one. So we're talking quite a lot of money here, guys. Okay, so we have a potential justification for why this sold. Remember, when we're talking about this rarity, it really goes with Mosins. Most of them are extremely common, but when we get to these really rare ones, it's exponential growth in rarity. And with that, a lot of times comes exponential growth in price. And I think this is something that catches a lot of people off guard. They don't realize that Mosins are one of the most common military surplus rifles out there, but at the same time, a variant like an original PE sniper is also one of the rarest military sniper or military surplus rifles out there. So Mosins kind of give us this paradox. You can have a Mosin that is one of the most common rifles and one of the most rare rifles. It just depends on the Mosin. But a lot of people don't understand the latter of those. People don't quite understand that there are some Mosin Nagant variants that are actually worth thousands and thousands of dollars. And even so, a lot of those are still kind of undervalued. And we'll talk about more of those in future videos. And today we're talking about the PE sniper rifle. So we have some justification for the price, but here's the next question is, was it actually warranted in this case? Now that's a really good question, and I'll let y'all be the judge of that, but we're gonna go through this rifle a little bit and talk about what is right and what may not be right. We don't know. So we could see this rifle, the stock appears to have a numbers matching stock, and the magazine appears to be numbers matching to the gun. This is a 1937 Tula rifle, but the bolt doesn't match. Now that being said, this is where things get a little bit weird because the bolt appears to be an original Tula, which is who built this rifle, sniper rifle bolt, which in itself is exceedingly rare. We can tell this by the font on the bolt numbering. And we know obviously it's not numbers matching, but this is from at least 1938 because it has that 2-letter Cyrillic prefix on the bolt handle, okay? So definitely later than the gun. So if it was the original bolt to the rifle, that would pretty well, not 100%, but pretty well tell us that this is in fact an original sniper rifle. The fact that we don't have the original bolt doesn't really tell us a lot. But one important caveat here is that the absence of a numbers matching bolt doesn't actually, well, do a lot in telling us that the gun's real or fake in this case, because remember I said earlier, having an original numbers matching, or I guess not numbers matching, but an original with a correct font, that's the word I was looking for, with a correct font, Tula sniper bolt handle is something you really just don't ever see, much like an original PE sniper rifle. So it's weird, it's very strange, and it's very interesting, okay? But we still don't have any definitive evidence. Now, if we look at the barrel markings of this rifle, you'll see above the date, you'll see 2 letters, one on each side of the barrel. You should see what looks like a C and a P. I guess an N marking it would be it looks like in English. That's what you want to see on an original PE sniper rifle. You see, in 1937, the Tula factory had separate barrel production for sniper rifles, where they were much more focused on tighter tolerances for the bore and things of that nature. And when one of those barrels was produced, it was marked with those particular 2 characters. So you definitely want to see those. But, again, that being said, that's not definitive that this is an original sniper rifle. And the reason I say that is because we have this thing called accuracy rifles, okay? And this is where this gun really, we don't honestly know if this is real or not. Because the thing about accuracy rifles is sometimes those barrels that were produced were actually not built on sniper rifles. They were actually used to build regular rifles. And this was in special cases where, let's say, maybe when that particular sniper grade barrel was built, there were no scopes or mounts available at the time at the factory to build said sniper rifle. And so, a lot of times, instead of waiting around for those parts to come, they would just take that barrel and use it to just build a regular 9130 service rifle. And I bring this up because I have seen at least one Tula 9130 rifle in my life that was a finished captured battlefield pickup condition rifle that had the accuracy markings on the barrel, but was not, and it was never was drilled for a sniper scope. Okay, so that's where things get a little bit sketchy, because that's about a $500 or $600 gun in today's market. But if somebody took that gun and then drilled it for, let's say, a PE or a PEM scope mount, at that point, anyone would have a very hard time proving that that was fake or real, but mostly fake, which is a big problem, because what you've effectively done there is take a $500 or $600 rifle and potentially, with the right original scope and mount, which is expensive in its own right, turned an otherwise, normal priced rifle into something that's, $5,000 or $10,000. That is a huge incentive for crooks and nefarious shysters all around to try to make some money. Which is something that, of course, I frown upon greatly. So this is why I'm always extremely leery of finish capture battlefield pickup condition sniper rifles, and mainly the Tula variants. We're not talking about Izhev's sniper rifles today, but I strongly prefer Izhev's sniper rifles in almost all circumstances, simply because they're much easier to authenticate, generally speaking. Now, there's one other caveat we need to talk about with PE snipers, is in 1937, as far as I can tell, based off of the research of Alexander Yushchenko, In 1937, original PE sniper rifles should have had a letter C stamped on top of the receiver, but you can't see that on one of these because it's covered up by the scope base. So in order to actually authenticate this rifle to the best of our ability, you would have to remove the scope base. And unfortunately, the seller didn't provide any pictures of that. Now, I'm not saying that the seller had any intention to believe this was fake or was trying to pass this off as fake. Honestly, this is very uncommon knowledge when we start getting into these little details, so I'm not surprised at all. And let's face it, if you were selling this gun, you probably wouldn't want to have to deal with taking off the scope and unscrewing all the screws and taking off the scope base. We don't really know, but from someone in our perspective as a potential buyer looking at a rifle like this, we would want that information. And unfortunately, that's really all there would be to go on, just that one little character. And even if we had that, I'm still not 100% sure they didn't put that on every single accuracy rifle. Although I'm about at least 95% sure they did not, but I'm not 100% sure. It's very hard to be definitive about some of these things, folks. Sometimes it helps just have the gun in person and look at it and then make a decision that way. But one of the other problems with round receiver PE sniper rifles like this one is that they didn't really have any nice, easy way of authenticating them like the hex receivers did. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the PE sniper is actually kind of an interesting rifle because they produced PE sniper rifles on both hex receivers starting in 1932 all the way back then, and in round receivers starting around 1936-ish. Now, the hex receivers, generally I strongly prefer because they're easier to authenticate. And the reason for that is the factory, when they produced the sniper rifle, they actually had a special assembly number for the mount and the scope. And this assembly number would have been stamped traditionally somewhere on the receiver of the rifle. And that could be really handy because if you see that, pretty much everyone at that point would say, yes, this is an original sniper rifle, okay? But we don't have that luxury on a later round receiver like this one because they actually stopped doing that in later round receiver models. So unfortunately, this one, not quite the easiest thing in the world to authenticate. You might be able to, again, if you took off that scope base and saw that letter, but otherwise, there's really no way to tell just from looking at these pictures if this is just an accuracy rifle that someone bought for, $500 and then decided to put a PE scope mount on with an original mount and base, to make everything look correct. I'm not even saying that anyone would do that to try to be nefarious and try to scam people. But as the buyer, you always have to kind of assume the worst in people, right? If you ever watch the show Pawn Stars, right, you'll know that the Pawn Star guys are famous for saying, I don't know about this, let me call in an expert. It's not that I don't trust you, it's that I just don't trust anybody. That's what they always say to the seller. And that's, when we're talking about spending, $10,000 or more, usually pays to be extra cautious. That's how I always try to play these games. Okay, so what have we learned here today? Well, we've learned that there are some Mosins that can be worth more than the car in our driveway, which in its own right is kind of disturbing. We've learned that original PE sniper rifles are extremely rare. And we've also learned that when you find one, you need to be really careful about what you're getting into because it can be a whole can of worms in its own right. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. I always like talking about Mosins, and hopefully you do too. If you guys like more Mosin Nagant content like this, please consider subscribing. Let me know if y'all have any prayer requests, and we'll see you next time. One thing I forgot to mention, guys, without giving y'all too much information overload, because I know this has already been a really long video, One other point someone might make who's potentially in the camp that this is a real sniper rifle is the fact that in 1936 and 1937, sorry I'm a little winded because I was just running, in those 2 years, the Soviet Union actually sent a ton of brand new, newly produced 1936 and 1937 dated 9130 rifles as aid to the Republicans during the Spanish Civil War. Now, almost always when you see a 1937 or 1936 rifle, it's probably going to be imported from Spain in the 1950s. It was used in the Spanish Civil War, not a finished gun. So one could definitely make the argument that since this rifle was produced in 1937, it was very unlikely that it's fake, because maybe they only sent the maybe they kept the sniper rifles for themselves in 1937, but then decided to send the non-sniper rifles, or at least most of them, over to Spain. Maybe. It's kind of hard to find good documentation on that. Again, it's the Soviet Union in the 1930s. Not really a great place for anyone at that time. But that being said, I also never seen an accuracy rifle marked gun that was imported from the Spanish Civil War. So, again, we don't know 100%, but you have to look at all these little details to think, okay, from a probabilistic point of view, does it make sense that it's more likely real or more likely fake given this evidence? This is tricky stuff, folks. Hopefully, again, this was some information for y'all and y'all enjoyed the video. Big Sam out.